The Thermopolis Police Department sergeant who shot a suspect to death in April 2023, was justified under criminal law, but he entered the man's home illegally to force the fatal confrontation, according to an analysis by a special prosecutor. So right away, I want to point out that this special prosecutor found in favor of the sergeant, decided this was not a matter that needed to go to a criminal trial and be put before a jury. So it's favorable to the sergeant. Every time we hear this report characterize what happened, keep in mind, this is the characterization of events that's written by someone who found in the sergeant's favor. This is a version of the narrative that's most favorable to this sergeant. And it's still shocking to my mind. So, because of a contradiction in Wyoming self-defense laws, the sergeant may face civil consequences, but he will not be prosecuted criminally in this case. As we'll see, there is no contradiction in the Wyoming self-defense laws. What they think is a contradiction is just a mistake on their part. At about midday, April 28th, 2023, Sergeant Mike Mascaro broke into the Thermopolis home of Buck Larimore, a McDonald's employee whom Mascaro, 33, a 33-year-old McDonald's employee, whom Mascaro had questioned earlier that day on suspicion of methamphetamine use. Larimore, the homeowner, shot Mascaro with a .45 caliber pistol during the break-in, dropping Mascaro to the floor. Mascaro returned fire, killing Larimore. So let's keep in mind what's going on here. This police sergeant unlawfully and forcefully, literally broke this guy's door in to get into his home. And this prosecutor, who ruled favorably for the sergeant, concludes that that breach of the home by the cop was unlawful. The cop had no legal justification for this unlawful and forcible entry into the homeowner's dwelling, and still found that when the cop shot and killed the homeowner, that should not go before a criminal jury. Let's see if this legal reasoning is sound. I see a lot of comments in the on YouTube, folks. So I answer all the comments and questions from the Law of Self-Defense members, all the ones that need to be addressed in the member chat. That's one of the benefits of being a Law of Self-Defense member. That's part of what you get. Try it out for 99 cents at lawofselfdefense.com/trial. If you're watching on YouTube and you want me to address a question or a comment, it needs to be at least a $10 super chat. Now, I don't know why you would do that. I don't recommend that. $10 per question on YouTube, when for less than $10, you get all your questions answered for a month for free. Try it out at lawofselfdefense.com/trial. But if it's not a $10 super chat on YouTube, folks, I just don't see it. So fair warning. All right, back to the report. The Thermopolis Police Department did not respond to the journalist request for comment by publication time Thursday. I bet they didn't. The decision, this is the prosecutor's decision. In a September 21st decision, Hot Springs County Attorney Jill Logan released Wednesday to the newspaper, Sweetwater County Attorney Daniel Aramusp, whom Hot Springs County appointed as a special prosecutor on the case. So they brought in as a special prosecutor a county attorney from a different county, which is a reasonable thing to do in an officer-involved shooting. A very small community here, by the way, folks. I think it's about 2,500 people, making it all the more appropriate to bring in an outside eye to the analysis. Although poor Daniel Aramus does not appear to have done a very legally sound job here. Hot Springs County had appointed him as a special prosecutor in the case, and he analyzed the shooting against Wyoming self-defense and criminal laws. Didn't do a very good job, I don't think, but let's see. With the special prosecutor, while the special prosecutor ultimately found Mascaro was justified in shooting the homeowner, the cop was justified in shooting the homeowner, the encounter didn't have to happen at all. Well, that part's not really relevant in the sense that lots of shootings didn't have to happen at all, but for, one of the shooters not getting out of bed that morning. The point here is that it's the cop who triggered the initiation of the shooting here. Quote, "This was a completely avoidable incident," wrote the special prosecutor. "The cop felt that breaking into a person's domicile was the best course of action for the misdemeanor of interference with a peace officer." So the interference charge here is that the cop had encountered the homeowner at his place of employment, the McDonald's, suspected him of meth use, asked him for some identifying information, and the cop says he gave me false identifying information, and that's interference or obstruction of a police officer in the course of his duties, which can be an offense, but it's a misdemeanor under Wyoming law. It's a misdemeanor. Misdemeanor interference with a peace officer. But the special prosecutor added, his job as a prosecutor was not to determine Mascaro's potential civil culpability for breaking in to the homeowner's dwelling, but instead to decide whether the sergeant was justified to fire back under Wyoming self-defense laws, fire back at the homeowner after the homeowner fired at the officer. And that's true, of course. A prosecutor's mandate is criminal law, not civil law. Fair enough. And the cop was justified in shooting the homeowner. The special prosecutor concludes after a painstaking, but I think largely mistaken, analysis of conflicting portions of the state's castle doctrine and its stand your ground law. The two laws contradict each other in parts, which drove the special prosecutor eventually to consult Wyoming case law as well. First of all, they don't contradict each other. Second of all, castle doctrine and stand your ground law would not be favorable to the police officer here, properly understood. Both of them, first of all, only have to do with whether or not there's a legal duty to retreat. And Wyoming, like many states, Wyoming used to be a duty to retreat state, but it's long since become a stand your ground state. So, of course, the difference between duty to retreat and stand your ground, in a duty to retreat state, you have a legal duty to take advantage of a completely safe avenue of retreat if it's available to you before you can use deadly force in self-defense. So if you can walk away with complete safety, you're not allowed to use deadly force in self-defense. There's only 11 states that are duty to retreat states. 39 states are stand your ground states. And those 39 states effectively say, if you're engaged in otherwise lawful self-defense. So, of course, this duty to retreat has to do with the element of avoidance, whether or not there's a legal duty to retreat. But there's up to 5 elements of a claim of self-defense. And the other ones are innocence, imminence, proportionality, and reasonableness. So even if you don't have the element of avoidance, you still have to satisfy the other 4 elements. You still have to not have been the initial aggressor. You still have to have used proportional defensive force. You still have to be defending against a threat that's actually in progress or immediately about to occur, that's imminent. And your conduct has to be both subjectively and objectively reasonable. 39 states say if you meet those 4 criteria, we're not going to put you in a cage for the rest of your life because arguably there might have been a safe avenue of retreat. We're not going to impose that generalized legal duty to retreat. Even in the 11 states that do, the duty to retreat states that do impose a generalized legal duty to retreat, they all have some version of the castle doctrine. And the castle doctrine says, listen, even if you were defending yourself out in the street, a public place, you would have had a legal duty to retreat. We relieve you of that legal duty if you're in your castle, if you're in your home. That's really the only thing the castle doctrine does, is relieve you of an otherwise existing duty to retreat. Properly understood, castle doctrine does not give you other special privileges to use force in the context of defense of your home. There are laws that do that, but if you label them castle doctrine, it just tells me you don't really know what castle doctrine means. So there are laws that give you greater discretion to use even deadly defensive force in the context of defending highly defensible property like your home, but they're not properly labeled castle doctrine. Castle doctrine has one job. It doesn't give you greater discretion to use force. It just says if you would have had a duty to retreat out in the street, we relieve you of that duty in your home. Stand your ground is just really an expansion of the castle doctrine to public places. So generally speaking, stand your ground says, hey, if you're in a place you have a right to be and you're not engaged in criminal activity, you don't have to be in your home. As long as you meet those conditions, anywhere you are in public, you also don't have a legal duty to retreat before you can use otherwise lawful deadly force in self-defense. In this context, a cop unlawfully breaking into a homeowner's dwelling, who would have the benefit of castle doctrine? Not the cop. It's not his dwelling. It's not his castle. Castle doctrine could only favor the homeowner. And in terms of stand your ground, you need to be in a place you have a right to be and not engage in otherwise unlawful activity. And this cop, this special prosecutor says the cop unlawfully broke into this guy's house. Was he in a place he had a right to be? Was he engaged in unlawful activity? He wouldn't qualify under stand your ground. So stand your ground, again, could only favor the homeowner here, not the officer. So neither castle doctrine nor stand your ground could lead the special prosecutor rationally to clearing this cop of anything. So that's just a misunderstanding of, certainly by the journalist and probably by the prosecutor as well, as to what castle doctrine and stand your ground actually mean and do.